today's video is going to be a little bit different than what I've done in the past. Some of you expressed interest in seeing my actual development process, coding something without really knowing what I'm going into, seeing the errors and the bugs that crop up. How do I make certain design decisions? I'm going to try and do a bit more of that today. 71% of you here, when I put up that community poll, wanted to see me code this feature from scratch. So that's what we're going to do. So let's jump right into it. All right, so I did do a little bit of preparation for this. I didn't want to be completely stumbling here. What I typically do before I start on a feature, this is especially in my professional software development job, I have my team do this. I write a dev spec. I go through, I think about the problem, what's all the background information, what are the different requirements that are needed, and how might that translate into code. So I wrote a very light dev spec for this feature in this little markdown document here. Markdown's really handy for getting some nice formatting when you're writing these things. So with the biomes, how I wanted to achieve that is through kind of modeling a realistic environment. Biomes typically shift based on the temperature and humidity of the environment. So we need to model temperature and humidity variations across the world. So how I'm thinking of doing that is taking two separate 2D noise functions. So this could be simplex noise or Perlin noise, and varying those over very large scales so that the player has to walk for quite a distance before that biome is going to change. How do we relate temperature and humidity to biomes? So I created a table here, what I thought would be the different biomes that we're going to model today. So we have low humidity, low temp, high temp. So for low humidity and temperature, that's going to be like a kind of a tundra, snowy environment. So we'll probably change the grass to snow there, something like that. For high humidity and low temperature, I decided to make that the normal temperate climate. For high temp and low humidity, that's going to be the desert. And for high humidity and high temperature, that will be the jungle. So the humidity is going to vary over the X and Y coordinates of our world, and then the temperature is going to be varying independently of that. Then we'll kind of merge those two together and look at the values at any X and Y location in our world and determine what biome is at that particular location. And that's going to dictate what type of grass block we're going to put there, what type of tree we're going to put. For the temperate climate, we're just going to keep the grass and trees as normal, keep the normal oak trees. For tundra, I'm going to change the grass to snow, and then I'm going to remove the leaves from the trees. So for the desert, any grass block will become a sand block. And for the trees, you don't get a lot of growth in the desert. There's not a lot of rain, obviously. So I was thinking of changing the trees to shrubs. So I'll just maybe render the canopy of the tree on the ground rather than rendering the entire tree. I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. It might look kind of funky. So I might just remove trees entirely or, put some cactuses in there or something, but we'll play around with that. And then for the jungle, we'll keep the grass normal, and then we'll change the trees to the jungle style. So in order to implement these new trees, we're going to need some new block types. This is a repository that contains all of the classic Minecraft textures. This is what I've been using so far. So if I go into the default folder here, so you see we do have some cactus stuff here, so maybe we can use that instead of the doing the canopies of the trees on the ground. But I went ahead and grabbed the jungle tree stuff. So I have the jungle leaves here. I also have the jungle tree top and the jungle tree side. So you can see that the texture of this bark is a little bit different than the other tree side I have here. This is more of a vertical pattern. And this one's more horizontal. It's a bit darker. I think it's supposed to resemble a coconut tree or something like that. So we'll need to add 3 block types for the new jungle tree, and we'll need a new block type for the snow as well. So if we put together a to-do list here, let's see, I am missing one to-do here. So very first thing we'll do is we're going to add new block types. So that will be jungle leaves, jungle tree side, jungle tree top, and snow. So we'll add those block types to begin with, And then I'm going to add a getBiome function to my world chunk class. So I'll pass in a set of coordinates here, and that will give us the biome at that location. So we'll use, as I mentioned before, simplex noise to model the temperature and humidity. And then maybe we'll add some helper methods that help us determine what block type to use based on the biome, just to clean the code up a little bit. So once we implement that getBiome functionality, we can determine, what grass block, what tree block. Then we need to update our generate trees method, and we need to update our generate terrain method. So the tree is going to vary based on the biome, as I described before, these requirements we have here. And then the terrain, we need to vary the grass block that's shown. So maybe I'll do that one first, since that's a little bit easier and the trees are a bit more involved. So there you go. There's a little dev spec we have, our requirements, what we're trying to do. Let's get cracking on this. I'm going to start adding these new block types, and let's go from there. All right, so I'm starting in the blocks file where we have all of our block definitions here. So you can see I've already added these textures here. So I need to add, I think it was, 4 different block types. So let's start with snow first. So the snow is actually just going to be a textureless white block. So it's going to look exactly like clouds. So I'm going to copy the cloud block definition. That'll be 10, call this snow. And then for our jungle tree, let's see here. I need to replicate these 2 blocks, but I need to replicate it for the jungle tree. So I'm just going to copy these. A block 11, this will be block 12. I'll call this jungle tree. And this is going to be jungle tree side, jungle tree top, and jungle tree leaves. So I'll call this jungle leaves. So I guess I lied. It's just 3 new blocks, not 4 blocks. We have 4 new textures, but not 4 new blocks. So I need to load the textures for our jungle tree. So I'm loading the textures up here. And this needs to be jungle tree top as well. So let's go and look, make sure we don't break anything. Always have the developer console open, always. So getting some different warnings here, but you can ignore those. I'm pretty sure this was due to some Mozilla extension I have for 1Password, so you can ignore that one. So everything is still working. So I think to make sure that our new blocks are being loaded in correctly, I'm going to swap out the default tree blocks with our jungle tree blocks. Just make sure that all looks okay. Actually, before I do that, getting ahead of myself here, we need to update these. So this needs to be jungle tree side, and this is jungle leaves, which I did not define here, did I? Nope. All right, we'll put that down here. Jungle leaves. So now you know why I prepare all this ahead of time, because my brain is just spacey and I keep forgetting stuff. All right, jungle leaves. Set that texture there. Maybe what I'll do, we'll go into the world chunk. And let's go to the generate trees method here. And we'll set this block to jungle tree. And then in the canopy, we'll set the block to jungle leaves. So all I'm doing here is in, let's see, where is it? Yeah, generate trees. My generate tree trunk method, we're changing the block type from tree to jungle tree. That'll change the bark of the tree. And in my generate tree canopy method, I'm changing the block type to jungle leaves. So I'm not sure how different these trees actually look, but I can see already the bark is different. So you can see the bark is going kind of a horizontal grain here. And the leaves do look a little bit different. I think I'm actually going to have to look at the Guess I can compare the texture in the toolbar to the texture in the tree. They are different. Maybe. I'm not super convinced. So here's jungle leaves. So it's kind of this like chunk in the middle here. And then the regular leaves. That is like really similar. But whatever. That's just how it is, I guess. I know in the actual Minecraft game, I looked at how they were doing the trees, and it looked like some of these outer blocks were made transparent while the inner blocks were kept opaque. That seemed like a lot of work, so I just didn't do that, but I think that would help make it look a bit more like real Minecraft. But yeah, I digress. That's not part of what we're trying to do here. Make this console bigger so you guys can read it. All right, so that's all loading correctly. Let's change our terrain. So the grass block, let's make that snow instead. Make sure the snow block works. So that did not work. Blocks snow.id. So there, we found a bug. Yep, that's because I called it cloud. So that's why we always test as we go. I'm always constantly testing as much as I possibly can. Because it really sucks to write a whole bunch of code and then you get a bunch of errors and you have no idea where to look. So it's good to continually check your work, do it in small blocks. So that's why I like putting these to-do lists together. So, I can say I checked off adding the jungle leaves, tree side, tree top. Now I'm checking the snow. And there we go. That looks kind of horrifying. I think we need to add some shading onto that. So this needs to be a Lambert material. Because the mesh basic material, that's just what it is. It's a very basic material. There's no lighting calculations on it. There's no shadows. So the snow needs to be a Lambert material. This works fine for the clouds because they're just way up there. There's no, we don't want shading on that. We just want them to look white. So that looks a bit better. I think we have some issues with the shadows. And this looks very gray. So I might change that to white. So we'll fix the shadows later. And I already know why the trees aren't rendering. That's because we depend on finding a grass block to determine where to put the tree. So that's a wrinkle I didn't think about. That's going to update how we're doing our tree generation. So let's just do one thing at a time here. I'm going to change this to completely white, see if it looks any better. Yeah, kind of. Just doesn't look great. Well, maybe my monitor's too dark. I think, let's see, let's try going into the main file. I'm going to tweak the lighting a little bit. Might just be too dark. Let's see, so here's my sunlight. So we'll do sun intensity. Let's just set that to like, maybe 2 will be too intense. Set that to 1.5. Not much change. All right, then we'll just go full bore then. So that looks a bit better. That's a lot brighter. It's a little intense though. So I think we'll turn it down to like 3. So I think that's pretty much okay. So let's fix the shadows quick. So we need to tweak the shadow bias, and I never really know how to tweak this. So let's keep that one at 0. There's 2 different biases here. There's the normal bias, which defines the position used to query the shadow map. That's offset along the object's normal. So it can reduce shadow acne, especially in large scenes where light shines onto geometry at shallow angle. So that's not the issue that we're having, because the sunlight is shining almost top down. So let's see, let's look at bias here. Shadow map bias, how much to add or subtract from normalized depth. So let's just try tweaking this by, they say to tweak it by very small values. So let's try that. Always read the documentation. And that made it worse. So let's go in the other direction. So that's a little better. So let's go 0.0005. So that looks good on the flat surfaces, but I'm still getting this acne, these artifacts on the sides of the blocks here. So I don't know, let's tweak the normal bias, see if that has any effect. Doesn't really tell me how much to change this by. I don't see any difference. I think for now, I'm not going to focus too much effort on making these shadows look super pretty. It's not really a priority right now. It's more of, just a tweak I can make later on. So I try not to get too lost when I find these issues. My task tracking software, I'll just throw a bug ticket on the backlog to come and address this later. It's really not affecting the playability of the game. It just looks bad. And, I think I just need to do more research and figure out which settings need to be changed to get rid of these artifacts. So let's just forget about that for now. I'll probably leave this like that to get rid of that weird shadow acne on top of the blocks. All right, so going back to our to-do list, we got the snow blocks in there. Let's undo this. Let's stick with grass. And then for our leaves, we'll stick with the irregular tree and the irregular leaves. So we should be back to our normal world here. All right, so that all looks good. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is implement the getBiome function. So we need to pass in a set of XY coordinates. It's really XZ coordinates. The horizontal plane in Three.js is the XZ plane. So leave some simplex noise for that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start with just the temperature. And then later on, I'll layer in that humidity as well. I always try and do the simplest thing first, and then I'll slowly add complexity on. Very rarely am I going to just implement the whole thing unless I'm had a couple beers and I'm feeling kind of saucy and think I can do it all. But really, you want to work with the smallest amount of work possible, test that out, and then build off of that. And that way, it's a lot easier to build out complex features rather than, spending 3 days working on this giant thing and all of a sudden you're at the end of it and it's like, this doesn't work at all and I have no idea why. So let's do that. Let's add that in. Let's implement getBiome. So I'll pass in a set of XZ coordinates. So I need a simplex noise function here. And we're going to need to pass in an RNG so that we're always getting the same result every time we do this. I could probably pass in the simplex noise object itself. I know I ran into issues with this before. I'm not sure if it was just bugs at the time. But I also don't feel like refactoring all this code right now to try and figure that out. So we're just going to work with this. All right, so let's see here. Simplex, I need to do noise 2D. I think I've already done that. Yep, right here with the trees. So always reuse code to save yourself time. So to get the biome, let's see. This will be an RNG. I always like to do a little bit of JS doc just so the IntelliSense works a little better. I would advocate for TypeScript on larger projects. I think this one definitely could have warranted TypeScript by now. I think a lot of the times it's overkill, like the time you spend kind of working around TypeScript's errors it throws and just getting everything kind of working just right. For smaller things that really aren't as important, all of that extra work really isn't worth the effort. But I do like TypeScript and I do use it sometimes. But I really like the fact that in JavaScript, I can just run the code. There's no build step. It's just boom, you're in the browser and it's running. So that's what I like most about it. But anyway, so this will get the biome at the world coordinates XZ. So these are world coordinates. You need to keep that in mind. So I think that's already been accounted for here. This takes into the account the position of the chunk. It's the origin of the chunk. And then we're adding on the local XZ coordinates. So really I should change this to be at the chunk. Let's call it local chunk coordinates, XZ. All right, so create the simplex. We're getting a noise value. So this is going to be temperature. And then if temperature is greater than 0.5, then we'll return, let's see, what could we do here? What are our biomes? Temperate, tundra, desert, and jungle. So for high temperature, let's do desert. And then if it's below 0.5, then we'll do temperate. Not temperature, temperate. So that's pretty straightforward. We need to define some scales for our biomes. So let's go into our world class and add some new parameters. So that could go under, I'm going to add a new section here called biomes. And we'll do temperature, scale. Let's make it, I think for testing, I'm going to make it small. Let's do 10. And humidity, scale, make it 10 as well. So biomes, temperature, scale. Biomes, temperature, scale. All right, so we can now control that. Now I want some controls on the UI as well, so I can tweak that in real time. So let's go to UI. We're going to need a new folder under terrain. And we'll call this the biomes folder. Biomes. And then we need to, we're adding these controls to the biomes folder. All right, I think now we can test our getBiome function. So what I'm going to do is let's go down to where we're generating the terrain. And I want to change the grass block here. Let's see if getBiome, pass in the RNG, pass in the XZ coordinates. If that is equal to desert, the grass block type, let's leave that like that. So if we're in a desert, then we want this equal to blocks.sand.id. Else if, let's pull this out here. So biome is equal to this.getBiome. All right, so if the biome is the desert biome, then we'll set the grass block type. Let's change this. Ground block type equal to sand. Otherwise, if the biome is equal to temperate, then the ground block type is going to be equal to grass. So we'll set the block IT to the ground block type. All right, so I think we're ready to test this now. We're changing the grass block to be sand or grass based on the biome. So immediately that looks freaking horrible. Let's try tweaking the scale. I think I set it to 10, which is insanely low. So if I make this 300, yeah, that's still not quite right. Bummer. Thought I would get it first try. Show you guys how good I really am, but now you can see I'm just a fraud here. So I'm going to change, for the sake of debugging this, I'm going to change the draw distance down to 1 so it doesn't take so long to load. And then I can go in here, I can tweak this a lot more quickly. So it looks like, I can see some variations here as I reduce this. So I can kind of see the pattern, but it's not changing every single block to sand. I'm not sure why. It's just changing some of the blocks to sand. Yeah, if I move this draw distance out, I should get rid of these clouds too. And let's just get rid of the magnitude here, set the offset to this. There, I can see that a bit better. So I can see there's this big block here where there's no, this big group here where there's no sand blocks. So they kind of decrease in density over here. So I think there may be some scaling issues with our noise function. Maybe it's not going all the way up to 1. That might be kind of hard to debug. Let's see. So let's go look at our biome code again. Let's make sure that makes sense. So we're doing simplex noise. All right, this is going to be a little crazy, but I'm just going to log the temperature here. I'm going to see what kind of values we're getting out. So yeah, there's the problem there. It's going between -1 and 1. And that is not at all what I want. And I think also passing in this RNG might screw things up as well. It might not be generating the same noise pattern every time. Yeah, I got to think about that. So first thing is I expected that simplex noise was outputting between 0 and 1, but you can see by the distribution of these noise values, it's between -1 and 1. So we just have to scale that, which is pretty easy to do. So we just got to do 0.5 times this. So that'll go between -0.5 and 0.5, and then we'll just add 0.5. And yep, that looks a lot better. Still, all right. I'll make this easier on myself so I don't have to change it every time. I just want to make the terrain completely flat. And I'm going to turn off clouds. So yeah, it's basically completely random right now, which is not great. So I just want one simplex noise function to rule them all. I want to keep recreating this, but I feel like everything else will be breaking as well. You know what? I'm going to try passing in simplex instead of RNG. So what if I just use the same simplex noise function for the entire terrain? So I'll blow that away, change this to simplex, and this will be simplex noise. All right, let's see what that does. There we go. That is what we want. So now I can expand this out. There, we can start to see the biomes grow. Let's bump up our draw distance. So that was the trick there. I guess to explain that a bit more, we're passing in our our random number generator object. But each time we're, going through a loop in our generate terrain function, it's, calling rng.random. So it's just moving that along to the next value. So we're initializing the simplex noise function using basically a different random number generator every time we were calling getBiome. But we just want to use the same simplex noise function that has the same seed that's used for all of the terrain generation. So we'll just pass that in, and that way we're always getting consistent values out. All right, so that was an adventure, but that's what you guys wanted to see, hopefully. So there we go. Let's go back to our to-do list. So I implemented temperature. And now we need to do humidity. So I'm going to take a quick break here, and then we'll jump right back into it. We've added temperature for our biome, and so now I want to add in humidity. So my first attempt here is going to be just creating a copy of this noise function. But I need to vary this in some way. I don't want to just recreate the same noise pattern here, because then the humidity will just follow the temperature exactly, and we're not really going to get what we want. Thinking about this, before I go and do that, I'm just going to leave this as is, at least change this to humidity. Let's just see what happens. So I'm going to set this to be the exact same noise pattern as temperature, and I'm curious to see what the result is. I need to tweak this to also account for humidity. So low humidity, low temp is tundra. Low temp, low humidity, tundra's down here. Low temp, high humidity is temperate. And then high temp, low humidity is desert. And high temp, high humidity is jungle. All right, so let's go back down to generate terrain. And before I get too deep into this, I just want to see what the biomes look like, what the distribution looks like. So I'm going to add in 2 more block types here for our 2 additional biomes. So if we got jungle and we got tundra, so this one's going to be snow. And for jungle, I'm just going to do just a placeholder. Since this is really just going to be the same as temperate, it's going to be grass. But I want to see the differentiation right now, so I'll just set it to stone. So let's check this out and see what we get. Now, it looks like we're just getting 2 biomes, which is kind of what I expected. Let's bump up our draw distance here. Let's go back to our code. So the problem with making these exactly the same is temperature and humidity are going to track each other perfectly. So whenever temperature is greater than 0.5, then humidity is going to be greater than 0.5. And vice versa. When temperature is less than 0.5, so is humidity. So we're only seeing either jungle or tundra. We're not getting desert or temperate. So we need to find a way to differentiate this so that the humidity varies independently of the temperature, and we get the different biomes. So one thing I can try is, maybe set, instead of adding the coordinates here, what am I doing? Instead of adding these coordinates, let's subtract them. Let's try that. What does that look like? And that doesn't look great. So you can actually kind of see the different noise functions layered on top of each other, which is not ideal. We want sort of one smooth, continuous thing that is slowly switching between biomes, so they're kind of blending together, not getting these harsh differentiations here with these little, strips of snow right there. So the issue with the simplex noise is that, there's 2 inputs here, humidity and temperature, but it's really outputting just one value. It's between 0 and 1, when really we have almost like 4 different outputs. We have these 4 different biomes. I'm trying to think of a good way that we can do this, where it's not going to look really dumb. We could kind of split up the simplex noise, so between 0 and 0.25, it's one biome. Between 0.25 and 0.5, it's another biome. I think that's going to give a more of like a banded appearance. I think I want to try that and see what it looks like. And that might make a bit more sense in terms of the biomes transitioning between one another. You're probably wondering what the hell I'm talking about. Well, I'm just typing out in the comments here. Let's say I just use one noise function. Let's just call this noise. This is going to vary between 0 and 1. So 0 to 0.25, let's say that's tundra. 0.25 to 0.5 will be, let's go with temperate. 0.5 to 0.75 is going to be jungle. And then 0.75 to 1 will be desert. They're basically going to slice our noise up into these different biomes. So in order to get from tundra to desert, you have to go through temperate, you have to go through jungle, eventually to get to desert. From like a geological point of view, that might make sense, but the tundra and the desert, those will be like peaks and troughs because we're kind of clipping the top and the bottom of the noise, where the temperate and the jungle, those are going to be bands. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm just going to comment out this code, and then we'll implement this right here. Otherwise, we will do desert. Here we go. I'm going to tweak what the jungle looks like. Currently it's just gray and that doesn't really make sense in my head. So let's make jungle the jungle leads. Bump up the draw distance. I'm going to blow the fog out. And let's set temperature scale to 200. So this actually doesn't look too bad. You can kind of see what I mean here. This is a really good reference right here. So this is when our noise is below 0.25. That's when we get the tundra. Then from 0.25 to 0.5, we get temperate, which is the lighter green. 0.5 to 0.75 is jungle. And then above 0.75, we get the desert. Yeah, I did not expect this to really work, but I think I like this. I just think we need to be able to tweak the thresholds a bit, so we can maybe make the desert a little bigger, or increase the size of these bands. Let's say maybe in the temperate zone, I didn't even want trees. I just want trees in the jungle. This would be a really cool way to make forests. Yeah, I think we're going to stick with putting trees everywhere. All right, we're going to go with this. I think this is a pretty good way of implementing biomes without getting too wild into it. So I'm going to change what I'm doing here. We'll change this to just scale for the biomes. So I'm going to replace these hard-coded values with something that I can change. Will be, let's say, tundra to temperate. This will be temperate to jungle, jungle to desert. Let's delete that comment. Then let's go into world. Let's modify our params here. So let's pull scale out. And this will be 0.75. Let's go update our UI. And jungle to desert. So now if I increase jungle to desert, we should expect the desert to get smaller, which it does. If I want to decrease the size of the snow patches, I can reduce this one. So that looks pretty good. I can change the transition between jungle and temperate. I'm still not a huge fan of how straight these lines are. I wonder if there's a way we could modulate the noise a bit with another noise function. So right now we just have this very smooth noise function. So what I want to do is I want to add a higher frequency noise on top of this to vary this a little bit. Let's change this from a constant to a variable we can modify. So noise plus equals, let's copy all this jazz here. I'm going to multiply all this by a small number. So I don't want these little variations to completely wash out our base noise. So let's make it even smaller. We'll do like 0.05. And then this scale factor, I want it to be higher frequency. So let's say whatever the scale is, I want to divide that by 2. So dividing the scale by 2 will make this a bit smaller. So let's see what that did. This is a lot of what I do, is a lot, especially with this procedural generation, you're just playing with math. You're just trying to combine different noise functions, different types of noise, different mathematical functions to get the kind of the look that you want. So definitely helps to have a good math background doing this stuff. Personally, I have a master's education in electrical engineering. I've done a lot of math in my life. I'm really familiar with math. So if it seems like I can do a lot of this stuff in my head, that's why. But really, it's just exposure. You don't need a fancy education. There's nothing crazy complicated about what we're doing here. It's just playing around with this stuff, having fun, getting to know the different math functions, just experimenting. And that's what game development's all about. All right, so let's expand this out. So I'm not seeing as much variation as I want to. So let's bump this up to 0.2. I want this to go between -1 and 1 so that it's modifying it in both directions. So we're no longer getting those really circular looking biomes. We're starting to get some more differentiation. I think the noise we're laying on top is a bit too big. It's modifying the biomes too much. So let's divide this by 4 instead. And now expand the scale out. There we go. That's what I want. So let's make the tundra smaller. So that's like 0.1. Make the desert smaller. I think that looks pretty good. So you can see I'm getting these little patches here. So it's a bit more natural. You know, it's not just this giant blob of snow. You can kind of see that this is maybe a colder area here. The heat's kind of creeping in. We have this kind of irregularly shaped desert in the middle of our jungle here. Not sure if it makes sense to have jungle next to desert, but that's the approach we're going with. So you can see how if I tweak the frequency of this noise that we're laying on top here, this perturbation, we can call it, to apply a fancy word to it. So let's divide that by 10, super high frequency now. So if I expand this out, you can see we get these a lot more higher frequency patterns. I think this is too much. We're going too far. I just want some natural variation. So let's go back to 4 here. And I'm going to need to add some parameters to control this amplitude as well as this divisor factor here. So let's go ahead and add those in, and then I think we're pretty much good on implementing our getBiome function. Let's see, variation amplitude. I like to break these up into separate objects. Amplitude 0.2, scale is going to be, let's see, that's 50, this would be 100, at least 200. And the variation scale will be 1/4 of that. So we can tune this independently of that. We won't just divide it. So save that, add it to the UI before I forget. So this goes between 10 and 500, that's fine. Amplitude between 0 and 1. And then in here, we'll do this dot params biomes variation amplitude. Don't be afraid of long variable names. Makes the code easier to read when you come back to it in a year. Yeah, I don't like to use abbreviated variable names for anything because it makes it really shitty for someone else to come and try and figure out what the heck your code means. And by someone else, I mean you in 6 months to a year. You know, this code looks all familiar now when you're working on it, but when you come back to an old project, it's like an alien wrote it. So I don't care how much text I use. You know, I try and use white space to help kind of differentiate blocks of code, but I know exactly what this is. This is the amplitude of the variation for my biome. This is the scale. And I did this completely wrong. Sorry, I lost my train of thought here. This should be just this. I'll tell you, talking and coding at the same time feels like playing an instrument and singing at the same time. You just gotta get used to it. I'm still getting used to this. So if I increase the variation amplitude, you can see that things get a bit more wild. So that's pretty cool. If you don't want any of that at all, you can go back to our very regular looking blobs, which I think looks like trash. And then the variation scale, we can make that smaller or we can bump it way up. So yeah, that looks really good. Now I'm gonna get my character back in here, kind of walk around. So I think let's go back and let's change this magnitude to, oh man, I don't even know what this was. I'm gonna guess here, 5, 2. Let's try it. A bit more. So it looks a bit weird. That is completely independent of the terrain. Obviously a lot of tweaking to do here. So I come down here, this will be jungle. And then I come out, there's some desert. So I think if you wanted to really do this, like a professional looking way, you'd completely change the terrain generation parameters. So like the amplitude of the terrain, kind of the scale of it. The reason I didn't do that is because when you have one biome jutting up against another, and they're using different terrain generation parameters, that's going to completely screw with when those biomes meet. Because the random numbers you're generating to generate the terrain, they're not going to match up at all. So you're going to have really big, basically a cliff between your biomes. So I didn't want to deal with that. So we're just looking at the cosmetics here. We're just changing the grass, we're changing the trees. But it's a start. So let's go back to our to-do list. Always feels good to check things off. So we implemented, I guess we didn't do temperature and humidity. We're not really doing that. So we went off spec, but that's okay. But we implemented that, implemented the new block types. So now we need to update generate terrain, and we need to update generate trees. We've already kind of done this. That's just going to be a quick tweak here. So if the biome is temperate or jungle, then we're going to go with grass. And then for tundra, I'll go snow. Desert, we'll go with sand. And that's it. The terrain's working. So we have some snow over there. On the sad little patch of snow, I need to change the world generation params here. This needs to be like 10. Offset, it's going to be 5. It's just too much water. There we go. So let's go walk around here. A little patch of desert over here. And is there any snow around? Let's go find some snow. There's a little patch of snow over here. I think it's a little sad. I think we need to make those a bit bigger. All right, snowy patch over here. Currently don't have any trees, so it looks a bit funky. But we'll fix that soon. I think maybe the sand could be replaced with snow too. If I'd implemented the water as actual blocks, which I really should have, these planes don't work too great. We could have swapped out the water with ice blocks instead. I think that's what's really throwing us off here, is that you have the snow that just transitions right into the sand and water. Just that doesn't make sense. So yeah, we could change out that sand a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm going to get into that much detail. Just trying to provide you guys with an idea of how you might go about doing this and giving you the power to tweak it on your own. I really want to focus on the trees now. I want to get trees to grow in these different biomes that aren't these grass blocks. If we go to the sand over here, same thing. And I'd like to add the cactuses in. Initially, I was going to do the bushes, but I didn't realize there was a cactus textures, so I'm going to try adding that in as well. So I'll change our tree generation model for cactuses, since that's just kind of a cactus growing. Doesn't have a canopy on it. All right, so our getBiome code is working. Didn't exactly implement temperature and humidity, so I can delete that, but that's okay. And now, as I mentioned, we're going to work on tree generation. So I think there's going to be a few challenges that arise with this. One of the first I'm going to point out, when we're generating a tree right now, what we're doing is to determine where to put that tree, we're searching for a grass block. So we go through, I guess for this particular set of X and Z coordinates, we want to plant a tree here. So we'll start at the top of the chunk and we'll drill down until we find a grass block. So this worked great when we had, just grass, but now we have snow, we have grass, we have sand, and, God knows whatever else we add in the future. This code isn't going to cut it anymore. So we're going to have to change this somehow. And we also have to update this so that when we're in different biomes, we're going to use, could be a cactus, could be a jungle tree. So we're going to have to set the block types correctly based on that. So there's a couple challenges. We'll kind of figure it out as we go. I don't think it'll be too difficult. I do have kind of one idea in mind for how we can approach this, change how we're generating trees. But before we get into that, I mentioned we're going to switch to... So instead of doing shrubs, we're going to do cacti. And I think that'll be a bit more fun rather than just having some leaves on the ground. So we need to add the textures for the cactus, which I've already went and added in here. So let's go add that cactus block. It's going to be very similar to a tree block. So we can copy that and add it down here. So ID of 13, cactus, 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 and let's add in the textures for that as well. Cactus side and cactus top. So then we'll update our texture mapping down here. So this will be cactus side. All right, so let's test this block out, make sure that is working. Let's go to world chunk. I'm going to comment out the generate tree canopy code and then change this to cactus. So we just get some just straight up and down cactuses with no foliage. So we got a bunch of cactuses. I don't play the original Minecraft a lot, but I'm assuming that when they generate cactuses, they have little arms coming off the sides. I don't know if I'm going to go that far in this video. I don't think that's really necessary to show that, but maybe if this is super easy, we'll go and add that in. Let's make sure the tops and the bottoms work. So it looks like that texture is being applied on the top there. So let's go back into our world chunk code and change this back to tree. Make sure we generate our tree canopies. So what do we need to do here? So we got the grass working. So change the tree type based on the biome. So we need to go ahead and get the biome at the set of X and Z coordinates. So we'll do const biome is equal to getBiome. So immediately we're running into an issue here. We're expecting a simplex noise function, which is just not being passed into this. And we actually need the simplex noise function that's being used to generate the terrain. That's because this simplex noise function is being passed into the biome here, and that's being used to determine the ground block type. So I think what we can do, and I've wanted to actually change this code for a while. It's not great how I wrote it. So if we go up here, we generate all the terrain, and then after the fact, we go through, scan everything over again, and generate the trees. So that just seems like a really inefficient way of doing it. We should just generate the trees when we generate the terrain. So I'm going to remove that generate tree line there, and we're actually going to generate the trees from within right here when we're laying down that ground block. And that's actually going to make this code a bit easier. We don't need to scan over the entire XZ plane of our chunk, and we don't need to drill down, look all the way down from the top of the chunk all the way down to the bottom to find the ground block. Because we're already laying down that ground block. We know exactly where it is. So I think this makes a lot of sense. So let's change this to so this code here needs to go up here. So we'll set the ID of the ground block. And then we're going to call generate tree. I'll have to change this, what arguments we're passing in here in a minute. So we'll do generate tree, call that generate tree instead of generate trees. Blow all of this code away. And then, let's see, these two functions, we have generate tree trunk and generate tree canopy. Just trying to think of how to piece all these calls together. So I'm going to have 3 different trees. I'm going to have an oak tree, I'm going to have a jungle tree, and I'm going to have a cactus. So I think I'll just make generate tree responsible for determining what to draw here. So I'm going to pass in the simplex noise function. I could just pass in the biome. I don't need the simplex noise function. So you got the biome there. Pass in the biome and the X and Z coordinates, and also the Y coordinate. That will be the base of the tree. So if the ground block is at X, Y, Z, then this will be Y plus 1. That'll be the base of the tree. So we don't need to get biome there. I think I'm going to eliminate this generate tree trunk function. That's just going to be the main code here. So biome X, Y, Z. So we still need to pass in our random number generator. So pass in an RNG there and an RNG here. And then we have still have our generate tree canopy function. So I think I'm just going to pull this out. This nested functions is kind of confusing. So generate tree is not defined, line 174. So it's this dot generate tree. All right, kind of works, kind of not. We're missing our tree trunks. So I need to fix this code here. So what we're going to do, we're not searching for that anymore. Don't need to find a grass block. So this code simplifies down to this. I just love when you figure out a better solution and just start deleting lines and lines and blocks of code. Just lets you know that you're doing the right thing. I'm just going to not do the canopies for now. Maybe that's screwing things up. Okay, no. RNG.random is less than the parameter change frequency. So let's just go through a log statement in here. Generating tree. See if it's even hitting this line at all. Yep, 155 calls. So it's hitting generate tree. Let's see what's going on here. This will be tree Y. That all looks kind of right to me. This is pretty bizarre. This block ID, you know what? I think it might just be erasing my trees. So everything greater than height, it's setting to empty. Now I have to remember why it does that. What happens if I delete this? That happens. That's pretty cool, actually. So those are all our resources. So I had those lines in there to remove the resources that are above the terrain. So now remember, you can see we have our tree trunks again, so we're on the right track here. So if y is greater than height, and we don't want to delete any tree blocks. So let's see here. What is this doing? This is iterating over all of the y coordinates. You know, this might be kind of dumb, but I think we can just start at the height and work our way down. So this dot size dot height greater than or equal to 0. So that way it's clearing all the blocks first before it lays down the ground block and the tree blocks. And it's not going to overwrite anything after the fact. I forgot to do, should be minus minus. Probably killed my browser with that. All right, we're back up and running. We have our trunks. So that was a little bit janky, but hey, that works. We got tree trunks. And we're getting tree trunks on the sand now, which we didn't have that before. So that's cool. We also don't get any trees below the water line, which is perfect. We're getting some trees on the snow as well. So excellent. That was a good change. So let's add the tree canopy back in, make sure that is still working. So it looks like the canopies aren't really rendering correctly. I think probably what's happening here is at this line, if there's a block in the way, then it's not going to put the tree canopy there. So we haven't yet cleared out all the resource blocks out of the way right here. Because it's kind of scanning across the terrain and laying down the trees and also eliminating those resources above the ground plane. So yeah, this just keeps getting trickier here. I think what I might just do is just delete this. I initially had this line in here because I didn't want the trees to, like the leaves on the trees to override the ground blocks, but that's not really that important. But yeah, this still doesn't look great. I still think it has something to do with how we're clearing these blocks here. You know, it might make sense to go through and clear all the resources in one pass and then go back around and then get the terrain laid down, get the trees laid down and everything. So I think we got to pull the tree generation out of here. And after we do all that, so this will be height plus 1. Create a, let's see, randomly generate a tree. Maybe just moving that down there will fix things. I hope so, because I'm running out of ideas here. Looks like we don't have the biome, so I gotta get the biome. There we go. Yeah, now we're having the issue with the water. Man, this is really confounding me. And the trees still aren't rendering correctly. Because we're still in this outer XZ loop here. All right, so I spent a little bit of time thinking about this, and I think the issues I keep running into is that everything's really interrelated. Like the terrain is interrelated with the resources, because the resources need to be below the terrain height. The trees need to live on top of the terrain, so they need to know the height of the terrain as well. But once you leave this function you're going to lose this simplex noise generator. Your random number generator is going to change. You're not going to know what the height of the terrain is unless you are scanning for it. So I think this all needs to be integrated together in some way. So that means down here where we're clearing all those blocks above the terrain height, so all those resources that are living above the terrain, we got to kill that because that's just making things difficult right now. So I think the other tree code, so if I just do this, let's see if we have good tree canopies. And we do. Except where we're at the boundary of a chunk, that's kind of an issue. But we have these full tree canopies. So now we're stuck with the issue of we have all these floating resources, which looks kind of cool. Reminds me of that kind of secret area in World of Warcraft classic back in the day. But we're not building that kind of game, so we need to get rid of that. So what I think I'm going to do is our generate resource code. I'm going to move it down here. And I'm going to remove, let's see, this code is commented out. We can delete that. And I'm going to remove it from here as well. So we've got rid of generate resources. We get rid of generate trees. And that's all now embedded within generate terrain. So let's go down here right after generate terrain, and I'm going to pass in our simplex noise function. So you can blow that away. One thing I'm going to do is for everything below the terrain height, I'm going to call it generate resources and see if there's a resource that needs to be there. And so that would eliminate this triple for loop here. And change it to this. So we'll pass in a set of x, y, z coordinates. So this determines if a resource block should be generated at x, y, z. So we're looping over each resource. We're getting the, just a simplex noise value at this location. And then we're determining if we need to put the resource there. So if it is there, then we'll return early. We don't need to keep laying down new resources. One issue with this is it might prefer the resources that are first in the array. So it's always going to check to see if a stone block should be laid down first before coal and before iron. I think it makes sense to not overwrite these. So this return, really, you want that to go away. Even if we lay a stone block down, we still want to check to see if there should be a coal or iron block there. We don't want to eliminate those scarce resources. All right, so we need to call this now. Let's see. I'm going to change the name of this. Generate resource if needed. So we're not always going to generate resources there. So let's go back to our code here. This generate resource if needed. Pass in the simplex noise function, x, y, z. All right. And we'll move this line out. So if no resource is generated, then we're going to put dirt there. So we can initially set the block to dirt, and then we'll check to see if any resource goes there. So that'll overwrite the dirt block. So if no resource gets laid, then we'll still have dirt. So that's there. I'm a little bit worried about this line here. If we're under the water level and y is less than the terrain height, then we want to set it to sand. Yeah, I don't think that's exactly right. I think if we're at the terrain level and we're below the water level, so all of the blocks on the surface of the terrain, those should turn to water if they're underwater. But we still want everything really below ground to be dirt or resources. What damage did we do here? Stuck in a tree. Yeah, this looks good. I'm still getting trees below the terrain. I think we can fix that. So now if I dig under here, we just got nothing. That's not good. What if I go over here? Yep, we have dirt underneath the sand. Look, we got resources under there too. So I think before, anything under the water level at all was all sand, and that's definitely not what we want. All right. Trees below the water line. We don't want that. So I think we can move this code back up. Then we can delete this line here since we're already getting the biome. And all right, there we no longer have trees below the water line. So let's update our generate tree method now. So go down here. So if biome is equal to temperate, then we'll do a normal tree. Else if biome is equal to jungle, then we'll do jungle tree block. Oops, this whole thing here. Otherwise, if the biome is set to, what is it, desert, that's going to be cactus. And then if it's tundra, I think what I'm going to do there, so be temperate or tundra. So we need to pass in the biome here as well. So if biome is equal to tundra or biome is, I should say, I don't want the tree canopies for the tundra because I decided I'm just not going to have leaves. So it's like if you had a bunch of deciduous trees, since they are oak trees, they're not evergreen trees, they're going to lose the leaves. So I'm not going to generate tree canopy for tundra. And I'm not going to generate the tree canopy for the desert because obviously cactuses don't have leaves. Let's put it this way. If it's temperate or jungle, then let's make the tree canopy. And I need to pass the biome in because when we're down here, I need to set the correct block type. So if biome is equal to temperate, go ahead and do this. Else if biome is equal to jungle, then we're going to use the jungle leaves. All right, let's give that a whirl. So already looking pretty good. A lot of cactuses clumped together over here. That's interesting. I'm going to bump up the biome scale quite a bit. Bump up our draw distance. All right, so here is our desert biome. I think they're still quite small. They probably need to make these biomes a bit bigger. But there's our cactus block. So we can chop down our cactus. There we go. I think we probably want a little more variability in the cactus height. They're all a bit tall. They just look like tree trunks, really. So let's go over to, I saw some tundra over here. And sure enough, no tree canopies here. Pretty sad looking area. I don't really like the complete lack of detail here. So this would definitely need something more. This featureless white block does not look great. So I think one thing maybe we can try and do is get rid of this sand. Maybe that's worth doing in these tundra areas. So let's see how hard that would be. So you need to go back up to generate terrain. So we're setting the sand here. So I'm going to remove this getBiome, move that up to the top here. So if biome is equal to tundra. Then we'll set the block type to snow. Otherwise, for every other biome, we'll do sand. Yeah, that's interesting because it goes below the water. So that's where the issue of the ice blocks comes into play. You know, if the water was represented using blocks instead of a plane. So I don't really like that change. I'm just going to remove that change. So we're back to having beach in the tundra areas. So probably a few too many cactuses. Another thing that would help a lot is having some extra foliage on the ground, like some flowers and grass and stuff. I think that'd be a really good thing to add in next to give some more variety in the world. Right now it's kind of boring. So there you have it. That's biomes. That's about as far as I'm going to take this. Thank you all for voting on this topic. It was a good challenge. I enjoyed doing this, and I think it was really fun to sit down and talk through my process and kind of show you guys how I code when I'm on my own. I'm not scripting everything out. All right, folks, that's it for this one. Until next time, take care.